Some people have every advantage in life. They're born rich, intelligent, and good-looking. They have every opportunity to make something of themselves. Then there are people like Charlie Chaplin, who had nothing going for them. No money, no intelligence, no looks. Yet despite these disadvantages, or maybe because of them, they managed to achieve success beyond their wildest dreams. How did they do it? What can we learn from them? Hey everyone, today we're going to discover the inspiring life of Charlie Chaplin, the man who became a global icon despite having absolutely nothing. But before we start, remember to give this video a thumbs up if you want to be inspired by amazing stories of human achievement and motivation. And now, let's meet Charlie. Charlie Chaplin was born in London in 1889 to two traveling performers. But he was just a baby when his parents split up. His dad left to go back to America, and his mom was left alone to raise him and his half-brother Sidney. Sadly, she didn't really want to be a mother, and soon after Charlie was born, she sent him and his brother to live with their grandparents while she went on tour. And this is where Charlie grew up. His grandfather wasn't a very nice man. He was abusive and constantly got drunk, so Charlie spent most of his time outside. It wasn't a great place to grow up. His mum was an alcoholic who often ended up in hospital and died when he was only 12 years old. His half-brother Sidney was sentenced to prison for stealing. Basically, if you look at his family tree, it seems like Charlie's destiny was to end up as a delinquent too. But instead, he decided to do the exact opposite. He managed to survive by being resourceful, kind of like the kid version of MacGyver. And he learned to be funny to get attention. His grandmother, though, hated it. She wanted him to behave properly. So she enrolled him in a dance school to control his energy. And that's how Charlie started dancing. He also joined a juvenile acting group and won his first prize for impersonating a drunk man. Pretty fitting considering what would happen later. By age 14, Charlie had dropped out of school and began performing full-time. He juggled, mimicked, and told jokes on street corners and in public squares. He was earning enough money to buy food and support himself. At age 18, he formed a comedy quartet called the Eight Legs and toured with them throughout Britain and Europe. Soon enough, he found his calling in life, bringing laughter to people. But not just any kind of laughter. He wanted to bring joy to people who were down on their luck, who were facing hardship and needed a distraction. In a way, Charlie wanted to give hope to people without hope. In his autobiography, he wrote, "I learned that the only way to survive in this world is to make people laugh. And so I tried to make them laugh, to take their minds off their troubles, even if only for a little while." One day, the Eight Legs performed in a small town near Paris. The year before, a devastating flood had destroyed everything in the town, and people were still picking up the pieces. As Charlie approached the makeshift stage, he saw a sea of miserable faces staring back at him. No doubt the townspeople thought the show would be a flop. But then something unexpected happened. As the show went on, they began to laugh, and by the end they were roaring with joy. The people weren't thinking about the flood anymore. At least, not while Charlie was on stage. It was in that moment that Charlie realized the power of laughter. It could actually lift people out of their misery, at least for a little while. And that's when he fell in love with his craft. A few years later, an American talent scout named Fred Carno spotted Charlie in Paris and offered him a chance to join his touring company in America. So Charlie left everything behind and moved to New York City. Just one problem, though. When he arrived, the company wasn't there. Turns out, Fred had gone bankrupt. So now, penniless and far from home, Charlie had to find a new plan. Enter the tramp. You see, Charlie always loved performing on the streets. He felt free, alive, and connected to the audience. And while living in New York, he met a man who shared that passion. His name was Max Swain, and he was a master of slapstick comedy. Under his guidance, Charlie developed a new persona, a lovable vagabond who stumbled through life wearing baggy pants, a funny hat, and oversized shoes. This new character, which Charlie called the Tramp, quickly became popular with audiences. People would follow him around the city just to catch a glimpse of him. In fact, it was during this time that someone took a photo of Charlie dressed as the Tramp and put it on a postcard. The picture was taken outside the famous restaurant Del Monaco, and today, that same building has a plaque commemorating the spot. Now you know why they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. That tiny postcard made Charlie an instant celebrity and landed him his first screen test in Hollywood. But the movie didn't go well. According to reports, Charlie was stiff and unnatural. Luckily, though, the producer liked him anyway and signed him to a 3-year contract. Charlie's first role was as a waiter in a Keystone comedy called The Kid. He was only on screen for 10 seconds, but it was enough for people to notice him. And that brings us to the next point. If you want to succeed, you don't need to be in the right place at the right time. You need to be in the right place at any time. It just so happens that some opportunities only knock once. In Charlie's case, though, that first opportunity was only the beginning. After appearing in several other short films, Charlie was given his own movie. He named it The Tramp, and it immediately won the hearts of audiences everywhere. In fact, it was so popular that it ran for 52 weeks straight. For the first time in history, a movie made its audience laugh without the help of slapstick or a funny story. All thanks to the comedian's facial expressions. This success gave Charlie more freedom to direct, write, and produce his own films. So over the next few years, he made dozens of movies, including A Night Out, The Barber, The Cure, The Immigrant, and 1A, all of which were huge hits. During this time, Charlie fell in love with a fellow performer named Lita Grey. She was a beautiful 16-year-old with a bright future ahead of her, but sadly, the relationship ended badly. When Lita was 15, Charlie had asked her to marry him, but she refused because she was underage. He agreed to wait until she turned 16, but then another woman appeared. Her name was Edna Purviance, and she became Charlie's leading lady. Despite their breakup, Lita eventually accepted Charlie's proposal and married him. The couple had 2 sons together, but their marriage was doomed from the start. In 1919, Lita sued Charlie for divorce and custody of their children, and although the settlement was costly, it only lasted a few months. Then, she accused Charlie of raping her sister, resulting in a second divorce and a hefty payment to her and her sister. But that's not all. At the height of his fame, Charlie was arrested for having an affair with an underage girl. The scandal was front-page news, and his wife threatened to expose him unless he paid her $1 million. Of course, he didn't have that much money, so instead he gave her half of everything he owned. It's safe to say things weren't going well for Charlie. However, none of this affected his work. In fact, he was arguably more successful than ever. Throughout the 1920s, he produced and starred in many of his greatest films, including The Gold Rush, The Circus, A Woman of Paris, The Idle Class, The Pilgrim, City Lights, Modern Times, and The Great Dictator. These movies remain hilarious even today, more than 100 years later. That's why they call him the man who played the world for laughter. But in 1940, Charlie's career took a nosedive. That's because soundtracks replaced silent films. And unlike other actors, Charlie never transitioned to talkies. In fact, he didn't make another movie for 6 years. During that time, he struggled to stay relevant, feeling increasingly bitter and depressed. Finally, in 1947, he returned to the screen with a new movie called The Circus. Unfortunately, it flopped at the box office, even though it's considered one of his best movies today. A year later, Charlie had another chance to redeem himself with a movie called Monsieur Verdoux. It was a dark comedy about a charming but greedy man who kills his wives for their money. Most critics loved it, but the public didn't. Some people said it was unfunny, but really they were just scared. See, Charlie's movies were usually feel-good stories that made people laugh and think good thoughts. But Monsieur Verdoux was a ruthless, unapologetic look at a serial killer. Plus, it came out shortly after a series of notorious killers were roaming the streets. So naturally, people were frightened by it. Despite the negative reaction, Charlie continued to work. He made a final comeback in 1967 with a movie called A Countess from Hong Kong. It was a romantic comedy that starred Sophia Loren, but it didn't save Charlie's career. In fact, it was his last movie. Over the years, though, his movies have stood the test of time and are still loved by millions. Today, he's widely regarded as one of the greatest filmmakers ever, and most people consider his movies timeless masterpieces. Now let's take a look at the lessons we can learn from Charlie's life. First of all, sometimes you have to be in the wrong place at the right time. Sure, Charlie had a rough childhood, but those tough circumstances forced him to be resourceful, which helped him survive. Also, if he hadn't been poor, he probably wouldn't have been interested in performing on the streets. Secondly, don't settle for the first opportunity. You might think that Charlie's first movie was his big break, but really it was just the beginning. His true success came a few years later when he started directing and producing his own films. Thirdly, success doesn't come from privilege. It comes from vision, resilience, and the courage to dream bigger than your circumstances. And finally, nothing is impossible if you try hard enough. We can't even begin to imagine the challenges Charlie faced, but instead of giving up, he used every setback as motivation to keep going. And that brings us to the final point. Don't be afraid to fail. If Chaplin's story has inspired you, imagine how many more untold stories are waiting to be discovered. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible journeys that prove nothing is impossible.